Welcome back to DreamHack Tonight. I'm here again. I'm your host, Renessa, and I am joined by Nahaz. Now, Nahaz, I know you've been around, associated, adjacent to some stuff with what we're talking about today. But this will be kind of a new area of the competitive world for you, right?
Big time. So we're going to talk and delve into some FGC stuff, some fighting game community stuff today. And I'm actually really excited about it because FGC is a very different dynamic from the areas of esports that I've spent most of my time in. Just for people that don't know, most of esports is very title centric. All right. When you look at your Call of Duty, we talked with Cornel a couple of weeks ago. When you look at Dota and League, those people that follow and play those games and those genres are very title loyal. And Twitch had a study a couple of years ago. There's a lot less cross-pollination than you would expect to see. The fighting game community is completely at the polar opposite of the spectrum, where from the great players like your Sonic Foxes to even casual fans, like everybody's following multiple games, everybody's doing multiple things, and it's such a wide open space that from a strategy perspective, how you approach it is very different. But the level of passion that you get, to me, with FGC fans is unparalleled in all of esports. I mean, these are the guys that were still lugging in dozens of CRT TVs to play Smash tournaments as recently as probably still now. But it's really neat, and I'm really looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, and one of the big things about the FGC that has been really challenging to navigate are games that can be played online. Because, we haven't been able to have people lugging in their CRTs, or, these days, if you have the high enough refresh rate monitor, it's acceptable now. And we've had to sort of reevaluate how everything runs with the FGC. So for DreamHack Beyond, and we'll bring him in here shortly, the master behind all the tournaments, the guy who knows pretty much everything going on in the FGC. But he's put together this great list of maybe different games than what you're used to hearing. Some of them are going to be pretty standard. But so here's our list right now. We're going to have Guilty Gear Strive. There'll be Skullgirls, Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, Virtual Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, and then Mortal Kombat 11 is probably the one that a lot of people are going to recognize. So there's over 6,000 in prize money available for online tournaments for the FGC, where online actually works. So we're really excited about that. And you're going to be able to sign up for those tournaments, smash.gg/beyondfgc. By the time you're watching this video, those should be open and available. But if they're not, just know that we are perfecting them to make sure all the tournaments and rules and everything are up there. But, I'm not going to hold this off any longer. Let's bring in our guest. We have Alex Jebailey. You might recognize his face as the Jebaited emote. Does not come from MOBAs like you think. It actually comes from the FGC. Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, pleasure to be here for my first time. Thank you.
First time ever.
Glad to have you,
we've
man.
never had Alex on a DreamHack Tonight.
Pleasure to be here. It's been a crazy week in the world of the FGC, and I'm glad you already knew all the games we're having. I'm excited to host those, and the fact that you also knew that Melee is kind of pivoting towards using LCD monitors now. The technology's definitely changed. CRTs are becoming, I have the biggest regret in the last couple of years was a kid came up to me and goes, "Hey, I have PVT monitors, the Sony production monitors." He's like, "If you want, I have 20 of them because my production studio is getting rid of them, $60 each." So I'm like, "I'll just take one. I don't have room for more." And now those things are worth $400 or $500. It's almost like the crypto of televisions. And so I'm just like, man, biggest regret. And even my friends, they come over, they see my one PVT, they're like, "How much do you want?" I'm like, "It's not leaving my house." But yeah, a lot of things have changed. People have adapted to online, and the FGC is always going to be one of the most resilient esports, gaming communities out there.
Yeah, the dynamic is so different, and it's cool because if you follow like even a lot of the very top players in that community, there's an eagerness to delve into new titles and to compete and to learn and to potentially even lose to players outside that top sphere that you just don't see in other esports, where everybody wants everything to be established, all the wrinkles ironed out. There's a lot of resistance to change. You look at all of the drama and all of the stuff surrounding so many CS:GO players hopping over to Valorant, and you contrast that with the FGC, where it's like a new title is just a matter of course.
Yeah. No, people are moving around all the time.
Yeah, games are always changing. I mean, oh no, you're good. A lot of games just get updates at this point, right? The fighting game community and the developers, they know what we like. They improve upon community feedback. The connection to the community has changed and gotten even stronger over the last couple of years, especially with COVID in terms of online, because historically, FGC's biggest weakness for online is our net code. When you look at a typical esport, Valorant, all that, when you play those games, you don't have to think about the lag. It's just automatically those games work. With fighting games, at a point where if you don't have the word rollback in your announcement for your online, which is basically a system that allows even the worst connections to have a good time with each other. Right. And Guilty Gear Strive, you won't hear that name as much as you hear Street Fighter and Tekken, but to give you an example, I announced my CEO convention in December, and Strive hit 512 player cap in less than 15 minutes. And the game isn't even out yet. It actually releases this week.
Yeah.
And
I just feel like that's something that you don't see in other areas of esports. And you kind of touched on this when you were setting things up, but you're able to look at these titles and to anticipate which are the titles that are going to catch the interest of large swaths of the community and do so very quickly. What are you looking for in a title when you're saying, this is a game that potentially isn't even out yet, that I'm thinking about planning an event and having that game? What's it in terms of a title in the FGC?
I think in one word, honestly, is legacy. Guilty Gear's had many, many iterations like a Street Fighter. You look at the last couple years with developers, with the Capcom Pro Tour for Street Fighter V, the Tekken World Tour for Tekken. So those games have become mainstays in terms of what is going to draw players to come. A lot of games, like, for example, the Beyond list, like Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, you might not see a lot of them come enter tournaments, but they still have just as passion as a community. And their online netcode is actually one of the best. And the beauty of a game like Power Rangers is crossplay is becoming a thing with consoles. Everyone who plays a Valorant, everyone's PC, you're good to go. Fighting games, for years, it was like, do I buy a PlayStation or Xbox? And now, Power Rangers, I hosted a tournament on one of our community clashes for DreamHack, and we had players from PC, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation all in the same tournament. So for that to be kind of the next generation of fighting games is incredible. Now with PlayStation 4 to 5, you have cross-generational play and stuff. But in terms of picking games, it's really easy, honestly. You know what everyone's playing. It's easy to follow the FGC. Pro Tours usually help the community members have bigger events with the promotion. But in a post-COVID world, it's basically just seeing what everyone's still talking about. And then you have the few niche games, right? Like a Skullgirls. It had a DLC, downloadable content, for the first time in like 7 years, I believe. After 7 years of coming out, they're having new characters come out this year. So a lot of games get new life breathed into them. But at the end of the day, it's what you kind of notice the trend of what everyone's playing. And then the beauty of FGC, for better or worse, is when a new so the last Guilty Gear is called Guilty Gear Xrd. The moment a new one's announced, people are ready to kind of switch over, learn that new game, and then you'll have dedicated people still play the older ones. But in terms of tournaments, it's always best to host the latest and greatest update and game. And there's been situations where our events had an update 2 days before with a new character, and we were forced to update every console, and players had to either we would ban them or learn them. So
mouse updating consoles at a physical event is that is an experience. Yeah, I've seen it happen at DreamHacks before, where it's there are people running through the rows and rows and rows of consoles, downloading all the updates. Okay, I didn't really know that Switch was a platform that people played on, and I'm really curious now. I mean, Switch is not the same tech specs as a lot of other platforms. Are those players at any kind of performance disadvantage, or are the games low performance requiring enough that it doesn't matter?
That's actually a great question. I mean, you have games like Mortal Kombat 11 have been ported over, but not at the the fidelity and graphical quality. But they're not crossplay. But a game like Power Rangers, the way it's designed was in terms of get as many consoles as possible. You look at a game like Brawlhalla, we've hosted at DreamHacks before. That's a great PC game. The requirements are not as high as most brand new PC games, so that is easy to transition. So I think it's at developers' discretion what they want the game to look like. But when games are made with more players in mind and ease of access, I think that goes a long way. But end of the day, you won't see live tournaments hosting a fighting game on a Nintendo Switch except for Smash Brothers, because that's exclusive, right? And Smash is built for the Switch, and will always have one of the biggest turnouts for tournaments. But the online is not the best compared to a traditional fighting game as well. So it depends on the title and stuff, but it is cool that I have a few people enter with their Switch because they don't buy other consoles, or they're a casual gamer that want to enter tournaments and now they have a chance. So the more the merrier, in my opinion.
Yeah, what blows my mind though about some of these older titles you were talking about is just how much stuff is still being discovered. I still remember one of my first events. I ended up talking to Wobbles about Smash, and it blew my mind that a game of that age, there was still tech that people were discovering on an ongoing basis. It was a very much a living, breathing game that people were still figuring out. So that it just struck me as so cool that a lot of the older titles, there's the same new ground being blazed as a lot of games that are just coming out. And it's a shared experience for so many people across different games, which is just something you don't see other places in esports. I guess I wanted to step back though and ask you, when I think about events, and I get asked about this from a business perspective, in other areas of esports, you're planning things around the big orgs, the big players, the big titles. There's a much more stable blueprint for how you plan and think about events. When you're planning an FGC event, what's your starting point? Because it feels like the blueprint there is a lot more dynamic.
Yeah, like you said, esports, they're mostly comprised of invitationals or qualifiers to get there. What makes FGC such a beautiful, diverse community is you have the game, anyone's welcome to come enter it, right? And then generally you'll see the same pro players that you follow on social media, or they're Twitch streaming now. We get more content creators than ever in the FGC because of offline events. Because you look at a guy like Justin Wong, when pre-COVID, even me as a former player, like traveling like half the year on weekends. So, and then the weekdays you'd spend getting your energy back to go back to the next tournament. And that's the beauty of FGC. There's so many, you have options, but end of the day, as an organizer, we want to create a safe, fun environment, have the games, run them by the community rules. A lot of games are very easy in terms of rules, and they're very straightforward. You look at Street Fighter, first person to win 3 games, winner, or 2 games, winner keeps the same character, loser can switch. That's it. Random stage select. You look at Smash Brothers, Smash Brothers is a Bible. You look at esports, it could be super long and drawn, especially from the team games like Overwatch League and stuff. So the beauty of the FGC is if you have the venue, you have the space, you have the amazing staff that basically does this out of passion. The rest kind of comes naturally as you build your event organically. And I've seen over the years, I've been doing this for, I'm proud to say, but not proud to say, I've been hosting fighting game tournaments over 4 decades, 90s, 2000s, the 10s, and soon to be the roaring 20s again. But over the years, I've seen a lot of esports orgs try to come in and host fighting games. And they think it's about the big prize pools and just throwing money out there and everyone's going to show up. And it doesn't work. They put in all this money and the production's amazing, but it doesn't grab the core attention of the players that just want to go press buttons.
So I've got to ask, right? And I hope I'm not taking us too far off track, because this is really fascinating to me. The investment strategy in other esports is a lot of times you can take what's worked in a lot of traditional sporting events and leagues and work off that. Get your name on the jerseys, get your name on the PCs, whatever. The investment strategy for the fighting game community is very, very different. And I I still feel like there should be a lot more money flowing into that scene than there is because of the scope and the passion of the player base. But I think a lot of organizations, a lot of traditional investment entities don't know how to approach the FGC. What do you want to do? What are you telling people when they say, I want to put my chips in on that FGC table?
It's not an issue. The thing is, there's so many different fighting games that are always ever changing. That's the problem, right? Capcom Pro Tour was one of the first fighting game developers to really build out a tour. And they've actually, I believe, have done it very successfully over the years, and they've bumped up the prize pools naturally through finding sponsors. But as an organizer myself, for like example, CEO, I have like, 10 to 15 different games each event. And my sponsors are usually the non-endemics, not game specific, to kind of come in and get everyone's attention. If you're a team org trying to come in, I think it's kind of shifted to player content, getting the name out there. Because like you said, in the fighting game world, a lot of us players, if we see somebody go, here's $500 a month, they'd be like, yes, let's do it, But there sometimes might not be the return, right? I think it comes down to Capcom, for example, and Brawlhalla is killing it right now. They have $1 million Pro Tour, one of the biggest in fighting game history, because they have the Ubisoft backing, they have the huge community, the Twitch following, and a game that just gets all these guest characters. But because they centralize their own Pro Tour, and they've been a part of DreamHack, we hosted multiple events for them throughout the year that were qualifiers. They can build their own community around that one game, and that will bring in kind of sponsors. The problem with a smaller event that is a all-encompassing event, like Evo example, CEO, Combo Breaker, we try to get in as many faces, as many people as possible. So it might be very daunting for these new people to come in. If from a sales perspective, you're like, okay, 5,000 people are attending this event, but how do we appeal to them to come just to our products? So it's a big difference, right? I mean, you have the Overwatch League where they have owners buy into it with their teams and stuff. The reason why FGC, I think, is still continuing to grow and will always outlast if there's ever an esports bubble is because end of the day, even if a Pro Tour drops the community is still going to be there running tournaments, right?
I mean, it's the ultimate grassroots entity, I think, in esports. It's just, it calls for different strategy. And I like a lot of what you said. And I still think, there are so many potential great brands out there that I think the total brand value exceeds a lot of the brands in more traditional centralized esports, but it's tough to get in the door. All right, Renessa, I've hijacked way too much of this with nerdy esports economics questions.
You know that I enjoy it. I mean, I have my own I was going to follow up with because I'm really curious. So Brawlhalla has this $1 million tour, and that's very different from the FGC. And I will say something we know about competitive communities is that they're fussy. They're very particular about certain things. And from the sense that I've gathered, FGC is proud of being grassroots. And I'm very curious if there was a lot of money, right? Like say like the H1Z1 league tournament view thing that got built in Vegas. Say that someone came in and said, we're going to build this huge venue. We're going to do all the different games, but it's going to be huge prize money run our way, right? Not run the FGC way. Because take a look at Overwatch. You got a lot of people in Overwatch that came from TF2, potentially CSGO players, etc. Overwatch is not run at all like those other scenes, and you had to bite the bullet and listen to Blizzard. Do you think the FGC would willingly do that if that kind of organized, buttoned up, like literal collared shirt, buttoned up, professional, we have to do things a certain way type came in? Or would they reject it for the grassroots less money? And I know that sounds like a weird question to people at home, or are they going to turn down?
I have my own answer to this, but I want to hear Alex's first.
Yeah, they both can exist. Like I said, Nintendo hasn't come in. They've supported my events in the past. We've done agreements to, use the license at DreamHack CEOs and stuff. And they support through marketing, right? And, it might not sound like a lot, but when I got to have a demo booth like E3 when Super Smash Bros. Ultimate came out, the moment I announced it, my website crashed, 1,000 new tickets were bought just to come check out the game. So there's other ways to help the specific events. In terms of players and stuff, they'll always reject it when they don't trust it or it's something brand new. but then they can just keep playing it. And if you want to win the money, you play by the rules. If you want to just have fun with it, they're still going to have fun with it. Because, you know, I still play fighting games for over almost 30 years now because I still have fun. I'm mostly a Street Fighter player. And if it's fun and you have the friends to play with, you're going to keep playing regardless of what happens in the outside world. And I would love developers to kind of take over and come in and do, when they kind of already do it, their world tours. And they do it very organically. They support the community events that have already paved the way for these developers. Because you look at, you know, when Evo started, it took a couple years before Capcom even acknowledged it in the early 2000s. And now one of the largest events in the world that gets, you know, Sony just partnered with them and has a stake in it to kind of take things further. And you look at exactly what they're doing. They're taking a community built brand Evo, and now they're doing PlayStation Evo online events all this summer.
Super smart.
And that just gets the name out there, and that will open doors for guys like me and CEO to keep growing and get that attention from the big orgs. But in terms of specific games, I think Brawlhalla is doing it to where they've actually spoiled the community, right? When they had DreamHack, they brought all the computers, the nugs, and the setups, and the drivers ready to go. From a community standpoint, it'll be very hard to run that game on our own. But the beauty of Brawlhalla is it's so popular online. They've got millions of players on a daily basis with that free-to-play model, which a lot of other fighting games haven't officially done yet. It's still $60 plus the character DLC. Killer Instinct and other games have done, you know, character releases. But end of the day, both sides will still exist. I think for the top players that want to make a living out of this, they deserve it. They're putting in all their time and effort. But we're still going to survive if that happens, whether or not it does.
And I think that the question that you asked, Vanessa, which I really loved, to me, that was already on my mind, thinking about the way that Alex had been talking about Brawlhalla, that in any other space in esports, I think if you saw somebody coming in and just doing things differently, running events in different ways, trying a different pricing structure for their title, people are so change averse in other areas of gaming. But it feels like in the FGC, at least from a distance, people that come in and do things differently get a bit more celebrated than in other areas. And I think that's it's an amazingly positive thing. The FGC is so nimble, and it's a community that's been used to being nimble for a long time, that there's adaptation there that you don't see in a lot of other areas of esports. I think that's tremendous, and I think it bodes well for the ability of the community to support multiple competitive models concurrently going forward. That's something that I just don't think a lot of areas of esports have really been able to do historically, and it's a shame. There's a lot of value lost there because I feel like people try to put too many square pegs in round holes. But ultimately, you know, what it comes down to is if you build it, they will come. If you have a great game that people play, just get out of your own damn way, because people want to play it with other people that enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's why the popularity of fighting game conventions are going to just blow up, because people have been stuck home playing online, and nothing beats the competition, learning, and sitting next to people, the trash talk, the camaraderie, all that stuff. So fighting games are, I'm telling you, from if my December event's any inclination, when 3,000 tickets got sold in less than 24 hours, next year is going to be the biggest year for the FGC. Assuming things continue to get better, the borders start opening up, international players can come to kind of open that up. And, you know, from what I know, a lot of developers are starting to kind of talk about next year with community events and hopes to bring everything back to the way they were before COVID. And I think the last 2 years sucked for a lot of us, right? As organizers, that we're so used to doing events.
As human beings.
But now I think they're going to be, even conventions are going to be a lot cleaner, I think. You know, I've been reading about a lot of flu strands have been killed off because of mask wearing all the time. And so hopefully a lot less germs are passed around at these events. And I've been to Japan a couple times, and masks are a regular thing there, even pre-COVID. If you're comfortable and you feel good, I think it'll kind of continue to happen for these live events, and people feel more comfortable and hopefully go back home and be well rested a couple days and ready to jump back into the next event.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Yeah. Go ahead.
With events coming back, so Alex has referenced it a few times. You know, we love him at DreamHack, does all kinds of awesome fighting stuff, but obviously you came from the CEO world. You know, that's what you started, that's your baby. And you talked about your tickets sold out, you've announced your next event and everything. But you announced it all on a really big milestone right? Like what was this anniversary? You know, what's the milestone that you just hit with CEO?
12 years. So 12 years ago on this past weekend was the very first one, which was built basically out of community love of, I was actually already hosting smaller events at like Hooters bars and restaurants and bringing in like 100 players just to push buttons. And then somebody had planned an event and it got canceled. And I replaced it within 3 weeks, and we had a fairgrounds where the AC broke in the middle of June in Florida. It was miserable. And I tweeted some pictures, and I love when I tweet these pictures and you see people see themselves like, that was me. Why was I standing like that? Or, you know, I can't believe I looked. Why was I at a tournament in flip flops? Like, you know, little things like that. But I wanted to kind of line it up with the 12-year anniversary of announcing. I just did not expect the response. I was going to wait it out until, you know, the summer and see how things were going with COVID. But I just went to a 5,000 person All Elite Wrestling outdoor show, and everyone was happy to be there. The excitement, people were wearing masks, most weren't, you know, but get vaccinated to feel better and comfortable. But I also feel for the people that, even me mentally, after a year, I'm like, I was scared to go around other people again. And then I've been around people for the last couple of weeks, and I feel better than ever. You know, and feeling slowly opening back up. But I wanted to get it out there. I had been teasing the date for a while. It became available with the hotel because I originally had a September event that I do every year called Siotaku. And I felt September might have been too soon. Now that this one's sold out, maybe I should have done both. Who knows? But I had an opportunity just basically as an organizer, contracts are a big thing. I already canceled twice with this hotel before. You know, and they had no choice really to help me out. And I ran an event the weekend the pandemic started hitting and Disney World shut down, and I couldn't get out of the contract because the state of Florida and every state didn't lock things down yet. So I was legally binded to do an event. And then, you know, the September event I felt was a little too soon. It got more space in December at the same venue. They moved the contract. They said, we'll give you more hotel rooms. Do you think you'll fill it up? I'm like, yeah, I think we'll be all right. And then I launched registration. The hotel's gone in 25 minutes. I just launched a third hotel next door. That's already almost sold out. Like, it's just insanity to think that people are that hungry. And I think any event that comes out later this year will do fine. And again, I'm starting to feel very optimistic about December. You know, can't require vaccinations in our state, but you could charge $1,000 venue fee and then discount to $20 if you get vaccinated and prove it. Some concerts are doing that. But in general, you know, Disney World's not requiring vaccinations. They're not even doing temp scans anymore. It's at your discretion. Play it safe, in my opinion, obviously. But by December, I think we're either 100% a go and events are going to come back and flourish better than ever, or some new strand comes out and we're all screwed for another couple years, you know. But I'm on the optimistic side, just being at multiple events. My brother just did a 500-person indoor-outdoor charity party for base camp. Super successful. Everybody was happy. He checks in with every attendee and nobody felt anything weird a couple weeks later. And, you know, and so things are starting to improve. And we're just ready to get back out there because human connections are what make us enjoy life. If we can't be around other people around the same passion, it's just like, just end up moving out to a cabin and never talking to another person again. It's the same thing. So
no. And so, and only a few of those human connections can make all of the online connections we experience on a daily basis that much more meaningful. I mean, I think so much of what you're saying resonates, right? You know, obviously there are risks, and there are always going to be risks, and you do the best that you can to understand those. But what I'm hearing right now is that, you know, a lot of esports events a couple years ago before the pandemic hit, they weren't thinking about a lot of these issues logistically, and we had some signals, including some tragic ones, that events needed to take safety and logistics more seriously. And I think if there's one thing that comes out of the pandemic, it's that, you know, I agree with you that these events are going to be huge, but I also think that they're going to end up being a lot better planned than they would have been. And, you know, if stuff blows up, it's going to blow up. There are still obviously risks, but I think we have to go forward as a community in spite of those. And I love what you're saying. I think that's awesome news. And I expect that a lot of different titles across esports are going to enjoy the same kind of boom.
Oh yeah, I think we're going to rival sports events by within the next 2-3 years, in my opinion, across the board, not just a big League of Legends finale and such.
Yeah, well, I mean, FGC had to play a little catch up on that front, but we saw that. We saw esports kind of take over. We saw all the virtual sim racing become a really big thing. We saw a lot of virtual like sports game athletes playing sports games instead of playing sports, and I know that's interesting. I mean, it's rough for FGC. You guys really, you had a hard time adjusting. I mean, what percentage of games were in a playable state when physical events shut down?
20%, 25, and in a way where people would enter it without the thought of complaining about their netcode connection, right? And again, Guilty Gear Strive, the reason why a lot of these big games that come out of Japan were behind in terms of netcode compared to like the Mortal Kombat's, the Killer Instincts, which are homegrown in America by developers. Over there, they don't have to worry about broadband infrastructure because their internet's so damn good. Here in America, we're so spread open, and that's what held it back. So traditionally, these Japanese developers, that wasn't their mindset that we need to build this game around online. It was around quality and development of the characters and stories and all that. Guilty Gear Strive ushers in a new era in terms of Japanese development. Rollback netcode's been around for years already, and it was built by the guys who started Evo, called GGPO, Good Game Peace Out, the Cannon brothers, who now are working on a Riot fighting game, right? So a lot of the stuff that's making us successful came out of the fighting game community by the people that built what we are today. And it's just now Guilty Gear Strive having this netcode. They did a couple beta tests, my tournament proving people are ready to go. But even online tournaments, I have our weekly community clash in a couple weeks. I already have like 70 entrants, which is more than any other online fighting game we've done yet with DreamHack Community Clash. And I think the online is just kind of supplement until we're back offline. But now that Guilty Gear Strive has proven to developers in Japan that this is important, if we announce a game and it doesn't have the word rollback netcode, people will still buy it and play it, but they might not want to support it 100%. And so fighting games were rough during the pandemic. Every time I saw an online tournament, it was just, I lagged out. Some asshole was playing on Wi-Fi. And that's why with Beyond and these games I've chosen, they have amazing netcode. And that's the reason I went with that. Because they have smaller communities that might not get these huge offline events or pro tours. But there's a dedicated community at home that's passionate, they're vocal, and that's kind of why. But I think Guilty Gear Strive will kick off a new generation of how fighting games are built. And the last thing from behind the scenes, rollback netcode has to kind of be built from the ground up with the game. You can't just throw it into another game without a lot of R&D and research and network engineering. I learned that working at Iron Galaxy. And so now just going forward, the developers have heard everyone's cries and complaints. COVID made them realize they have to listen to how important online is. And now I'm kind of excited for the future, both online and offline with these games.
Right.
As ever, necessity, the mother of invention.
That's true. Yeah. Before we let you go, Alex, I'm going to do one more question for you. We talked a lot about the technicalities of the FGC, what we're doing at Beyond, CEO, Community Clash, all those things. But I want to drill down into the heart of what FGC is, right? What defines the fighting game community as a whole? What is your buzzword or your sentence that you wrap up your life in?
Register for, no, I'm kidding. Passion, community, brotherhood. So many friends, some of my best friends have been around because of Street Fighter and fighting games and the arcade culture. It's its own culture and entity now, but community really is the one word I would use to describe it. Because again, whether there's big money or not, we're going to play these games, we're going to play them together, and memories have been created, friendships have been formed, and that goes across a lot of video games. But with fighting games, it's just there's so many options out there that you're going to just meet so many different people at a singular event that you might not play their game, but you know of them because of their game. And it kind of carries over. But community is the big buzzword, and passion. People can play just like any other esport. At the end of the day, we have fun with these games. We could play them 24 hours a day because it's so easy to find other people that play them too.
That's wonderful. Nahaz, any last question you have before we let Alex go?
No, this has reinforced a lot of the things that I admired from afar about the fighting game community, but you never really appreciate how deep those things go and which things are just on the surface until you talk to somebody that's been in the weeds for a long time. So really glad to meet you, Alex. This is the first time that we've spoken in person, but a lot of admiration for what you do, my friend.
And that's why I'm not too far away from the Dota community with Jebaited.
So
infiltrating one esport at a time that's not a fighting game.
So
Amen.
Nahaz, I actually don't know if you saw this. So if you remember the DreamHack, we were both hanging out in Sweden back in 2017 DreamHack Winter. Alex was in the crowd, and Dagny, the producer, knew he was out there and zoomed in on him while he was doing the Jebaited face in the crowd.
I do remember.
So that was.
I now that you say it, I remember that shot. Oh man, I saw it happen. That's
somebody. I'm like, let him know I'm gonna sit and watch for about a half hour. Make sure I'm on. You know what I mean? Like that's me because I come from I'm very close to the pro wrestling world, and I know the kind of moments that people live for and enjoy. And you got to catch people by surprise. So that was really cool. and going to DreamHack Winter and Summer really showed me how passionate LAN was and PC players. And I grew up on PC. My oldest brother, I still remember trying to get into his computer, play like test drive using DOS help commands on like how to type out the startup command and stuff like that. So I've been around with the landing side of things, and our mailman tried to get us on 56K to play Doom online. It's
nice.
It's cool. Oh yeah, that was miserable.
That's my college dorm experience you're describing. Be careful.
But it's just great to see how far things have come, and I love every community. I check out everything. I like to learn from how other people do their things, and it helps me do a better job with the FGC.
Well, it was great having you, Alex, and we're in meetings all day together, so I'll talk to you shortly, but I'm glad, you got to meet Nahaz. So for everybody watching, if you don't already follow the face of Jebaited, if you want to know more about the FGC, or go spam his own face at him with Dota clips, I mean, that's fine too. It's Jebailey on Twitter. He's got that little verified check mark, and you're going to be able to join all of his tournaments at DreamHack Beyond. Probably the moment you're watching this video, those are going to be up and available to register at. So thanks for joining us, Alex. We look forward to seeing you and everything you're doing at Beyond.
Thank you so much.
And of course, he transitions out on that face.
Oh,
all right,
yeah.
Nahaz, did you get your fill of the FGC?
Definitively no, but I had a great time. No, I have not gotten my fill. It's such a different community from the rest of esports, but I think in a really positive way. And it's Evo is such a microcosm of that, where there's so much passion. It's like reading Dota patch notes on steroids when you listen to the reaction of people about what titles are going to be at Evo and what are not. But ultimately, that whole community is going to come behind and support that event. And I think that that scene has had a lot of notches in the win column in the last couple of years, and I think it's going to continue to be successful because ultimately it has that grassroots framework. I think the rest of esports has really a lot to learn from those guys, and it's super cool seeing people. I mean, 4 different decades. That's,
I know, right?
I mean, that in
Alex.
esports, you might as well be talking about like back to the time of the dinosaurs, right?
Yeah, early 2000s is quite the rollback. What I really hope to see is netcode is being prioritized now. The past year kind of forced that to happen, which means, what you're talking about with the grassroots and everything. Honestly, we've talked about this on other podcasts. We've talked about this a lot on social media. You have to have monetization options to get sponsors involved. A lot of that comes down to broadcast hours. If you are limited to a 6-hour tournament at a LAN event, that's a lot less broadcast hours than 3 weeks of online qualifiers leading up to a physical event. And so this excites me because I think financially the FGC just gets more support if they can run online tournaments.
I think that's incredibly important. We should wrap this up because this in itself could be another like hour-long discussion. But when you're talking about content, it's easy in a lot of these different titles. It's easy to fall for the extremely skewed distribution of views and think that everything depends on like one or two things going viral. No, volume of content really does matter. And I think a lot of these different titles are finally waking up to the fact that, you need to get a lot of creators on board. You need to support the modal member of your community. You need to support and make sure resources are available for the content creator that's not getting, the millions upon millions of views, because those are your future. The guy that's getting millions or gal that's getting millions of views right now is not necessarily going to be the same person that's doing that a year from today. And the kind of broad support for content creation that we're seeing in that space is something that I really hope spreads outward to a lot of different areas in esports. And I think the way that that DreamHack is doing events like this, that's what I want to see happen in more places.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really excited to kind of just see, because it's not just one online tournament on a weekend, right? I mean, those are great, but I am really excited to see just every single day a different game, maybe some of the same players, maybe some different players, and you just get to kind of have this big FGC extravaganza. So if you're watching and you want to know more about the FGC, you can head over dreamhack.com/beyond. You're going to see everything going on in the event. You can click on the FGC page, sign up for tournaments, learn more about what's happening, see what else we've done. And if you liked Alex, if you like the Jebaited emote, we have another surprise coming on our YouTube channel. Yeah, where people submitted clips to see which debate he ranks the best of all of these submitted clips. So just keep your eyes out for that video too. I think he's gonna have a lot of fun with that one. So that will also be up on this channel. So once again, I was joined by the wonderful Nahaz. You can find him at Nahaz Dota on Twitter. I'm your host, Renessa. I'm gonna be Renessa Gaming on Twitter. We really like to be very specific in our handles. and thanks for watching this episode of DreamHack Tonight. We'll be back next week with another aspect of Beyond. Thanks for watching, everyone.